Milí přátelé, vítáme vás v Ecclesia Podcast.
Diskutujeme zde se zajímavými osobnostmi z katolické církve.
Jdeme na hloubku a řešíme aktuální dění.
Jsme Ecclesia Podcast. Ptejte se s námi.
Tato speciální vánoční epizoda v angličtině s Markétou
A Jacobem. Český překlad této epizody najdete v komentářích pod videem.
Monsignor Archbishop Charles Balvo was born in Brooklyn in 1951 and ordained a priest in 1976 in New York. Having finished his studies in canon law, he entered the diplomatic corps of the Vatican on March 1st, 1987, and has served in the nunciaturies of far-flung places such as Ghana, Ecuador, Chile, the Czech Republic, Jordan, and Lithuania, among others. Last year, in 2018, he was named the nuncio for the Czech Republic. In 2005, Monsignor Balvo was consecrated as an archbishop. Your Excellency, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much. It's my first.
What does nuncio mean? What is your job description?
Well, the word means a messenger. That's what, from the Latin, like we say, I announce, to announce something, it's the same root. So I'm a messenger, if you will, of the Holy Father to the countries in which I'm sent. So that's an apostolic nuncio is apostles. It's, we use that adjective in the church, so to mean apostolic administration, apostolic nunciature, apostolic things, so from the apostles.
And does your role as an apostolic nuncio differ from that of an ordinary diplomat? Are there further responsibilities?
Well, my response, say, an ambassador of a country, say Canada, for example, is representing the interests of Canada, and will try to promote products, tourism, invite Czech people who go and visit and see all the beauties of Canada, and also represent the government, their policies, and organize visits of ministers, parliamentarians, and all sorts of things like that, and vice versa. Improve contacts between Czech Republic and Canada, whatever country they may represent. My work is less like that because my relationship is with the church. So I certainly have a diplomatic function. I have relationships with the other ambassadors, but I also, and more importantly, my work is with the local church.
Right.
And with less so with the government, since the Holy See isn't really a country, so we don't have commercial interests, we don't have industries, we don't have cultural, we don't have political, we don't have consular visas and things like that. So, I mean, it's very different. So. In fact, in the year that I've been here, I've gone around a lot to see different parts of the country and different parishes and places that have invited me, like the Vysoko-školské katolické hnutí, for example. I have celebrated a Mass for them in different places at different times. So that's my work, is more with the church.
How did a young man in Brooklyn, growing up in 1950s and 60s, become a priest? Did you grow up in a religious family?
I did. Now, I was born in Brooklyn, but when I was 8 years old, that's in 1959, we moved out of the city, which was not uncommon in the 1950s. A lot of people left central cities in the United States to move to suburbs, say 45 minutes, an hour away by car or by public transportation, because people wanted to have a little bit of the countryside, but also be close enough to the city where most of them continued to work. So as my father did, he was working in New York City, so we left the city. So I was in elementary in Základní škola when we left and moved to this place about an hour north of New York City. Yes, my family was, some American families are close to whatever ethnic origin. Mine is mostly Irish, some Italian, but we were not closely linked to either. For my parents, the most important thing was our Catholic identity, in fact. So I'm the oldest of 5 children. So we went to Catholic schools, primary and secondary schools. So when I was about 11, I was an altar server, ministrant. That's really how I thought, really the idea came to me to be a priest, because I was serving the Mass, and then eventually the interest came that, this is what I would like to do. So I entered the seminary. It was a high school seminary at the time, did that and all my other studies. So the idea to be a priest, the idea to be a diplomat, that's later, a lot later.
Yeah, that's also very interesting, the idea of being diplomat. We have a question on that.
So
we can...
So you served as a parish priest in various parishes around New York State. And then, I guess, a few years later or a decade later, your trajectory changed to,
Yes.
to becoming a diplomat.
Yes.
So maybe we're interested in finding out
How
does
that
happen.
happened.
Yeah.
Well, I did my philosophy studies in New York. We had a regional seminary for New York, New York, Brooklyn, and the Diocese of Long Island. So I went with a seminary there. And then I was sent to Rome for my theology study. The United States, like many other countries, has a national seminary in Rome. There's the German college, the French college, the Mexican, Brazilian, etc. Ours is called the North American College. We took all North America, including Canada.
Thanks.
There is a Canadian college, but however, it was established in 1859 before the Dominion of Canada was formed, so it was given the name. In any event, that's the seminary for the United States in Rome. So I was sent to Rome. I was ordained there in June of 1976. And then after ordination, I had a couple of parish assignments as an assistant, or kaplan, as the used in the Czech language.
Yeah.
2 parishes, 5 years in one and another. They were fairly large parishes. The first were people mostly of Italian origin, since I spoke Italian, learned it there in Rome, of course. Then I was sent to study canon law at Catholic University in Washington. I was going to work in the archdiocese. But now I knew I learned as a seminarian in Rome that this service existed. And eventually, one of my classmates from Rome was already studying to be in it ahead of me. So it's not something I didn't know anything about, but it's certainly not something I expected to do. But as I was in 1984, spring, when I was finishing my studies and expecting to go back to New York to continue to work, mostly with canon law offices, letter came from the Secretary of State asking if I would be interested in joining this. So I did. I accepted it. So that meant going back to Rome to finish my studies in canon law and get the doctorate. So I was in Rome studying another, let's say, about 2 years, a little bit more than 2 years. Then on the 1st of March, 1987, I got my first assignment, arrived in April in Accra in Ghana in that year. It was not something I ever planned. I mean, if you want to say, was expecting to serve in the Archdiocese of New York for the rest of my life. But that didn't happen.
During your tenure as apostolic nuncio in various difficult jurisdictions, such as the countries in Africa that you were stationed in, you represented the Catholic Church in countries where Catholics and Christians are in a minority.
Yes.
How much more different was this than service in countries with a Christian heritage like in Europe, let's say?
It was, to make it quick, like Chile and Ecuador, Latin America, they have a strong Catholic influence because they were Spanish colonies. Others, like in Africa, you have Ghana and you have Kenya, South Sudan, which eventually served in Christianity. The Catholic Church has been present about 150 years. I like to say that I was in Ghana, the church was 100 years. I went to South America, the church was 500 years. I went to Czech Republic, the church was here 1,000 years. Then I went to Jordan, it was there from the beginning. So, and then after that, then when I was in the Pacific Islands, it was all very varied. New Zealand is, is mostly non-Catholic. But then many of the islands, some of them are all Catholics, or predominantly, it depends on often who went there, the French or the English or the Spanish, and then after that, Kenya and South Sudan, most people are Christian of various denominations. So it was a very varied experience, and going to different places, having different timelines, if you want, of the presence of Christianity that affects a lot the society. I mean, places like South America, or even here, even if perhaps not so many people are actually going to a church service on a regular basis, there are churches everywhere. There are a lot of traditions that form part of culture that maybe people don't necessarily link them with a particular religious practice, but that's the origin of it. So, yes, and if you want to talk about Christmas, for example, there are so many traditions here, whereas a place like Kenya, where Catholicism has been there about 120 years, they don't really have their own proper traditions as we have. You have the Christmas tree, you have the Christmas lights, you have Christmas foods, you have all these certain things. So, in fact, they will often still take things, actually mostly from the Northern Hemisphere, Christmas trees and things like that. But they're yet, if you want to say, to develop their own, other than the basic message of what Christmas is, the incarnation, the message of the birth of Jesus Christ, that's the same everywhere. But everything that goes along with it is different, can be different.
So would you say that maybe in these countries, these Christmas or Christian traditions are more pure or less commercialized?
Well, they would be to a certain extent less commercialized, but that's an economic distinction, because in a place like Kenya and especially South Sudan, which is in the middle still of civil strife, people are surviving. So they don't have the money to spend on anything else other than their necessities, and sometimes they don't even have that much. So life is a struggle for many of these people, even if they have a regular income. In Kenya, for example, most people work, but the salaries are very, very low. So therefore, it's a struggle for them to put food on the table for the family. So they're not going to be going out buying Christmas trees or other things because they can't afford it.
Before you're sent to some country as a nuncio, how does the preparations look like? Do you have a team who prepare, articles about the culture background? Do you have to learn the language? How does it go with the preparations?
We don't have that. It's not so organized. However, with my assignments before I came as a secretary, let's say, you just are sent. You get a letter saying, after 3 years in Ghana, you're going to Ecuador. Yes, more or less. But as nuncio, so I've been nuncio. I was in Wellington, I was in Nairobi, and now here. So as I arrive, we receive a great many more in writing instructions rather than spoken. And we have instructions that come from the different Roman offices about issues, a little bit of the history, what is the situation now. As far as the language is concerned, since I was here before, I had the opportunity to learn Czech. When at the time, the nuncio, his name was Giovanni Coppa, there was someone who volunteered. Her name is Miroslava Brejková. She's still alive, but she's quite old now. So she came every day, during the weekdays. Yeah. And then an hour with the nuncio, an hour with me. So the nuncio was writing, she did the translations for his homilies, which he wrote, then she translated, and then he would go through them, he would read them with her. That was mostly what he did. And by the time I arrived, he had been already 6 years, so he had a basic already understanding of Czech. So that's how I learned it. We don't always learn the local language. In Kenya, there are more than 40 local languages. So that's not even when I was in the Pacific Islands going to all these territories, there was mostly English and some French, because I covered French Polynesia and New Caledonia, some places. I learned to say in Samoan or Tongan things like thank you and good morning. So obviously knowledge of languages is important. And for the most part, like most diplomats, our basis are the most English, French, Spanish, Italian for us, since Rome. Yeah. And then whatever you learn along the way, some countries, they concentrate. So your career will be in Africa or will be in Middle East, so you'll learn Arabic. If you go to Asia, perhaps you might learn Chinese or Japanese or Korean. So I did learn Czech. I wouldn't say I'm fluent. I can manage. Because it's grammatically it's a challenge.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you don't have to tell us.
Yes, So in any event.
So maybe to a more serious question.
Right.
Pope Francis is he's kind of different than the popes that preceded him.
Yes.
And he's called for the church to be more open, more accepting to groups of people that haven't been maybe talked about in the church before as often, such as homosexuals, people who had a divorce. How do you view this change?
One of the things about working for the Holy Father is I have worked for three, in the sense, served under three more, Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict, and Pope Francis. Now, I was appointed as nuncio by Pope John Paul II in the last group of appointments. He died the day after my appointment to New Zealand. So, and then Pope Benedict. Now, I don't see them very often. And then Pope Francis in 2013 was the one who appointed me. I was appointed to Kenya by Benedict, but my letters were signed by Francis. So there's certainly, the popes are different. And there is certainly a continuity as the successor of Peter, but he's bringing a different view of the church because he comes from the global south, which is where often the growth of Christian faith is. I mean, Latin America already has been Christian for a long time, but Africa, Asia, I mean, he's gone to Thailand, to Japan, to Bangladesh, to places where the Catholic population is very small, Myanmar, because many of the Asian cultures, there aren't so many Catholics, so many Christians. So it's one of the things that he sees, that the church is something that there's still a lot of mission work to do, and he often speaks to what he calls the peripheries, the outside. You always think of the edges of things, and sometimes different groups, as you mentioned, people have sort of felt that's where they are. So what the Pope is trying to do is maybe not necessarily agreeing with everything that people say or do, but to try to preach the gospel to them, to reach them, to show that they are not excluded from the church's attention, from the love of God, from being human beings and having human dignity. It's something that he very much and continually repeats, this kind of thing, challenging us, meaning church leaders, I mean, not everyone, but you want to say very often the bishops and things, to be willing to take risks a little bit. So that's very much a different kind of attitude, say, than more, in Pope, say, John Paul II and Pope Benedict in different ways, but his has been more noticeable in that sense.
You said that you're not seeing a Pope that often. So how does the contact with him look like? Do you have to send him regular reports, or how often you see him in Vatican?
I have regular correspondence with the Roman offices. Our main contact is with the Secretariat of State, which is among all the different congregations, these congregations, as they're called, bishops and clergy, religious, etc. So we do deal with them, but yes, part of my work is to inform the Holy Father how is life in the Czech Republic or any of these places, both the Church's life, but also interest. The Holy See takes interest in what's going on. So, for example, if we have elections, we send reports on what are the outcome, what are the causes, what is the political situation. This is a regular thing. As far as seeing the Holy Father himself, it's something that, at least with Pope Francis, I can do every year, in the sense that I will go once a year to Rome to visit the offices, our superiors, as we say, to just have face-to-face contact, talk about things. If there are things that they would like to say, I'd like to say, and we can ask for and get an audience with the Holy Father. Now, one thing that has happened recently is that every 3 years now, so 2013, 2016, and in June of this year, we have a meeting of all the nuncios. Now, some countries have regular meetings with all their ambassadors at once a year. They'll come a lot of them do it now, at Christmas and New Year's, because there's less work. I don't know if the Czech Republic does.
Does it every year?
Yeah, they have these things. We did not do that.
Okay.
But we've started doing it every 3 years. And we are about 100. The Holy See has a large diplomatic service as point of view of number of missions. We aren't so many people, but so we are about 100 throughout the world. So on that occasion, he'll have a talk with us. We get to greet him. Usually we'll have a mass with him and then a meal. He is there. We don't one great big table. But and there is personal contact. And I've had the opportunity, and it's now 4 years, but in 2015, he visited Kenya when I was there as the nuncio. So his first visit to Africa was Kenya, Uganda, and the Central African Republics. We started in Nairobi. It was November 2015. So we were across the table from each other. He was 2 days in the nunciature. So there you have this personal contact. He knows who I am when I'm not a small man. You can't see me on the podcast. And on a personal basis, 2 years ago, I was very sick. I was out of action for 6 months, and I was several months in Rome. And he called me on the phone to greet me, to wish me.
That's nice.
So he knows, at least, he sees me, he says, all right, that's Charles Balvo. He knows that person. So when I saw him a year ago between Nairobi and here, and then at this meeting in June, so on both occasions, I said to the Holy Father, come visit the Czech Republic.
Yes.
But he only smiled, he didn't answer.
Very diplomatic.
Yes, no verbal answer, just a smile. So anyway, so I do see the Holy Father, but it's like any other service. It's not that the ambassadors are going to report directly to the head of state.
Right.
You report to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, your own, and other ministries according to whatever topic you're dealing with.
On the topic of apostolic visits, as you were talking about how the Pope visited you in Kenya, I think it was Pope John Paul II who started this kind of traveling around the world.
Yes, he was the really traveling.
Yeah. How important do you think this is for the Church?
Before him, Pope Paul VI started. The Pope John, he went to quite a number of places, actually. But John Paul II he had over 100 foreign trips, and then within Italy, he was also visiting a lot of places. So it's very important. It's a personal contact. The Pope gets to, obviously, when he goes to a place, you see the best in a certain sense. There's big organization. This is true of any visit. If a president of another country comes here, it's all organized, and you don't take people to see the worst of your country. As a rule, when you have a visitor in your house, you don't take them to see the junk that you got in the closet. You want to show them your nice rooms, everything, serve them a nice meal, and you keep your closet, hope things don't fall out. So we do the same. The churches, the countries that the Holy Father visits, but it's an opportunity, and people very much appreciate it. And the Pope can speak to issues, which he did. And when he was in Kenya, we had issues that are affecting society, young people. Doesn't enter directly into politics, but he talked about certain issues that are important. Pope Francis likes to reduce, say, so much of the personal attention. It's not, sometimes you can develop a bit of a cult of personality cult. This is like a rock star. He would like to be less than that, to focus on really what his message and being, because that's part of what, if you want to say, the apostles did at the very beginning, is they went out. So that's what he does, and that's what, on a lower level, he expects us to do. And the bishop, will go to the different parts of his diocese and visit everything and be a visible person, not simply sit in his office and wait for people to come to him. He wants us, parishes and things, to go out. So he does the same.
You have served in Czech Republic back in the 90s.
Yes.
And now you came back last year.
Yes.
How does the situation changed here
in
the Czech Republic? Because you came after 30 years. That's a big difference now in our history. Velvet Revolution and everything.
Yes. Well,
how can you reflect on the change here?
Well, a simple thing I'll say is that I remember when I was here in the late 90s, you did not have these very well-known American eating places like McDonald's, Burger King, KFC. These were not here then. They are here now. That's one big difference. And quite a few of them are around here, on our street and these other places. There are a few of these.
That's a good point.
Well, and then, you talk about Prague as a city, it's not a lot different. It's all these places, Malá Strana, the same. But there certainly is a change. The economic situation, if you want to talk about it, is better. The whole development of technological, at the first time there were no mobile phones, banking was a lot of these things were just, the internet were just barely starting, which, to a certain extent, would have been true anywhere 20 years ago, but still, after 1989, it was only 7 years after that, a lot of the infrastructure wasn't there, Certainly, on that level. I would say, as far as, certain politically, yes, it's different. At the time I was here, Václav Havel was the president, and of course, he is an unforgettable kind of figure of politics and leadership. So now, and the first 2 years I was here, the prime minister was Václav Klaus, and the third year was Miloš Zeman, both of whom, when Klaus was president, and Zeman, of course, is president. So the political challenges they're also different, that I'm not, we don't have time for things, but at that point, just going back to freedom, being part of return to Europe, and then in the meantime, the Czech Republic has been part of the EU, and now there are discussions about how to do that, how best to stay, and what needs to be, that. So the political discourse is certainly different. I wasn't the head of mission 20 years ago as a nuncio, so certain things I didn't see as much as I do now. But as far as, say, the Catholic Church is concerned, certain things, like there are far more, now you have structures in the sense of you have schools, you have healthcare institutions, you have hospices, because under the communist system there was nothing private. The government did everything, so there was no space at all for any kind of private initiatives in healthcare and education and all these things, which we now have. And there are opportunities for meeting people, evangelization, and as I said, I've been with the young people of the Catholic school movement and gone, and I see that, yes, if you look at statistics, maybe it isn't a high percentage of people that will be regularly practicing their faith, but I see people are committed.
So we already touched upon this, your service in Kenya, where you were also a permanent observer to the UN Environment Program.
Yes.
Do you think the climate change is an important topic for the future? And also, do we as Christians have a responsibility towards addressing things like climate change?
Well, as in Nairobi is the headquarters, because when UN had the main headquarters in New York, then you have many agencies in Geneva. So 40 plus years ago, the UN in its system wanted to have a headquarters of some sort in the global south. So UN Environment and Human Settlements was set up in Nairobi, which is just barely in the southern hemisphere, but it is. It's the third largest duty station after New York and Geneva. And then you have others like UN, UNESCO's in Paris, the FAO, which is the Food and Agriculture Organization, is in Rome, and there are other things. Environment is what's called a full membership program. So all UN members belong to, it's called UNEP, United Nations Environment Program. The other one is not as high ranking, the UN Habitat. There are only 60 members rather than, so in any event. So I was an observer, so I regularly attended meetings. And in the last several years, every 2 years, you have what's called UNE, United Nations Environment Assembly. When Pope Francis visited Nairobi, it was a half day, full day, another half day. So the full day, the last event, was the visit to the United Nations headquarters, UNON, United Nations offices in Nairobi. And it was his longest speech, and it was in Spanish, which is one of the official languages of the UN, so he could speak freely. So he spoke about that issue, because that took place just before the COP21, which was the one at which, in Paris, where you have the current agreement to reduce emissions and all that. So we consider it an important issue. And when I was in the Pacific Islands, one of the things that the Secretary of State had asked me to do was to speak to the bishops to not so much address the science of it, but the effect on people's lives. Because in some of the islands where there are these coral atolls where there's any elevation of any kind, as the sea levels are rising, it affects them. In fact, some of the islands are already making long-range plans to evacuate, to move the people to another island, say what's called a high island. So our interest at that point is on what are the effects on human beings, more than specifically what is the science, because that isn't so much our field of operation. It is what is the humanitarian effect. And the fact of the matter is, creation is something that comes from God. It's not something we should abuse. We need to care for it. I mean, it is part of being a human being, and if you from the biblical perspective, to be somehow responsible for all this. So it is, it's certainly an important issue, and people are seeing that after a certain amount of time. Can every single phenomenon be, a result of human activity? Perhaps not, but still, we do have, when you've been in some places, you go and you see all these smokestacks and all this going up into the air, it has to do something. So it's an interest, yes, an important one. Personally, I don't like to see messy things, so to keep things all in order, recycling, the plastic in this one, the glass in that one, the paper in that one, we do our best.
Yeah. The Czech Republic will soon have a new cardinal. Will you have any say in the choice?
At the present time, Cardinal Duca has already reached what we call the retirement age, and he submitted it. That was before I arrived. But the Holy Father asked him to stay. So until I receive, some kind of, authorization from the Holy Father or the proper office, which is the Congregation for Bishops, he would continue. And then in the near future, the 3 bishops in Moravia will also reach the retirement age in Ostrava, in Olomouc, and Brno. They were bishops when I was here the first time. Well, there was a whole new generation of bishops in the 1990s because they couldn't be appointed during the communist era. So now, I mean, in Bohemia, most have been changed already. But in Moravia, they are still the same, but they're going to be changed. So as nuncio, and this is true everywhere, we are the ones that have a great deal of responsibility about the process of consultation after, unfortunately, if a bishop has died and the see is vacant, or then when a bishop is about to retire or has reached retirement age, we are given the responsibility of making the consultation to determine who may be the candidates and then obtain personal information about them, their qualities, and then we submit the results to the Holy Father, and the Holy Father makes the appointment. So I do have something to do.
Okay.
And I will, at the present time, there is no process looking for the successor to Cardinal Duca because the Holy Father has asked him to remain. So then when I receive, information or authorization, then I would start the process.
So, as this is our Christmas episode,
it will be released just right before Christmas.
Okay.
So we would like to ask if you have a Christmas message for our listeners, perhaps in Czech, if you want to try. But English is fine.
That's all right.
Or French or Spanish.
Well, no,
whatever you prefer.
Vyprošuji vám, aby Kristovo světlo zářilo ve vašich srdcích a ve vašich životech a rozptýlilo každou temnotu a vyjadřují pevnou naději, že Bůh zahrne vás a všechny vaše nejbližší svým hojným požehnáním. So I wish you all the best for Christmas. It's a very beautiful season for many reasons. We often give gifts at Christmas because we have received a gift, which is the gift of the Son of God, the gift of Jesus. So I wish all of you who may be listening to this very blessed and happy Christmas. Thank you.
Thank you for your Christmas wishes and also for a beautiful interview. Thank you for your time.
Yes.
A loučíme se s vámi, naši milí posluchači. Děkujeme vám, že jste si na nás udělali čas a přejeme vám Merry Christmas
and a Happy New Year.